Outer Orange. Tier list. Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back. OuterOrange here. Today we are doing a tier list. I actually got requested to do something like this over on Twitter, so thank you to the person who decided, hey, you should do this. And because I was like, I don't, you know what, sure, I'll do this. So here we have a set 4 overdressed tier list. Springfest is coming up very soon. Here I am going to kind of give you my thoughts. Keep in mind, these are my thoughts, like just what I think is actually doing pretty well over in the set 4 for us in the English format over here. If you are about to enter Springfest, do not forget that you may need some cards, and if you do, you can go over to 50 cards. That's right, 50 cards, and get your cards. You can use my code ORANGE to get yourself some cards for a discount. You'll be supporting me, supporting the homie, and yeah, that's the sponsor. So we have like our S tier. I don't really know how memey I want to go with this. For now, I guess I'll go simple. I'll go A, B, C, D. One more. Probably on another row below. Make it that spot. Like, there's just nothing to help this deck right now. Whatever deck falls into here, they're just really struggling. They really can't do much, and they just need some help. So the thing about overdress format right now, or like in the set 4 format specifically, so overdress is in this spot right now where like there's a lot of matchup specific decks, which is a good thing. So a lot of decks are actually kind of more even. So in some matchups, a deck may really accelerate, while in other matchups it may fall apart, and the deck may seem strong, but that's only because of the matchups that it's seen. Or a deck may seem weak because of the matchups it's seen. So while that is the case, we also keep in mind that some matchups, even if they do struggle in those matchups, they have a better success rate than other matchups. But like, again, this is kind of more my personal thoughts, what I've been seeing, what I've been looking at, deck lists, prep testing, all this stuff. So keep in mind, this is more so my thoughts. Don't take it too hard. Just you look at the list and maybe use it as a way to test and see what you may or may not get out of it, and kind of just go from there. I have Ellis Steele here as the first one. Oops, I moved Ellis Steele. Ellis Steele is not a terrible deck by all means, but we are currently not in lyrical set 2 meta, so Ellis Steele and all the lyrical decks are honestly lacking except for one. So because of that, I actually think this is a very much a C tier deck right now. I just think there's stuff that just destroys it. It does have a chance. It does have a chance of success. It's just so much harder now to do that, especially with the triggers lacking. I think once the triggers come and stuff like that, I think Ellis Steele could probably bump up to potentially a B tier, but right now I think C, maybe even like high D is probably the spot where it's going to have to be for a bit until we see some kind of change. We got Barrow Magnus. Barrow Magnus is a very weird deck. So a lot of people think this deck is like insanely strong, and some people this deck actually is not that great. I talked to someone about this recently. Their name is Nix, and they mentioned how there's like this like that Barrow Magnus is kind of like a wild card deck. It's really strong, but it's in like a wild card category, and the reason being is because like at its best, it is insane. It doesn't care what its face is or whatever, but it does have like a wild card type of defeat too. Like, you can just randomly die to random stuff, and especially if your opponent's not healing all this stuff. So it's kind of a wild deck. I do consider this deck S tier on its like highest. The deck is just insane. It deals with other meta decks really well, and it really just doesn't care what it faces because it just doesn't matter. It goes around resist type cards. A lot of decks just can't handle decks like this, for example, just can't handle that board wipe. So this just gets really aggressive really fast. It's got Swirler that gets insane numbers. Now you can't just, you know, guard with your little 5Ks anymore. You have to take the really lethal blows and just hope for the best. So we have Bastion. Now a lot of people think Bastion is actually kind of bad. I think Bastion is actually good. So Bastion is pretty much the same thing it's been. It just hasn't changed. Like, the only difference now is that it's gotten even stronger, and Ragiel actually works even better in the deck. Put it in A tier, probably the best of the A tier, but it may go to S tier depending on like once I kind of start following things around. This deck does have some bad matchups, but I think if you actually think it through, it can easily be in your favor. Deck draws still a lot. The deck still has insane power. It definitely defeats the decks below it. So the decks below this tier, it definitely defeats. So Bob Sagra. How do I explain Bob Sagra? So Bob Sagra is one of those decks where it's like really good but still needs more. Nirvana is like the better version of Bob Sagra right now. The Bob Sagra's numbers do get really high, but Bob Sagra is a weird one. So she board wipes all the time, has really high pressure, and if you hit your moons in time, you have like all this like insane power up, but sometimes it just doesn't, it just falls off. I'm gonna say this is kind of like a B tier deck right now. I don't think it's as insane as some of the other some of the ones that are above it, but I don't think it's terrible either. Next we have Bruce. So there's 2 different Bruce decks right now that are pretty much kind of showing up. There's like regular Bruce, which is just grade 4 Bruce plus grade 3 Bruce, and like just the regular engine of, you know, what you already were running with Nard, you know, Marjorie, all this stuff. And then there's OTK Bruce. Now OTK Bruce is actually insane, but it has a really high glass cannon condition. It's another type of like wildcard deck. Barely seen Bruce. I really don't know if it's an A tier or B tier type of deck, but I'm going to say I'm gonna put it in the A tier. I think it still has a chance. I think if you play it pure, you're still gonna see success with it. I do think it's gotten a little bit more glass cannon, and it might fall off to B tier in some situations and matchups, and some matchups is still A tier. I think losing Persona Ride kind of sucks sometimes, like, and I think that's the biggest downside to this deck, but it does have a restand, like a Vanguard restand specifically, along with the rearguards restanding, which is pretty brutal. And like I said, if you play the OTK build, you're pretty much swinging for like 5-6 crits, and then you restand for 5-6 crit again. It actually gets very brutal very fast, so I think it's like a low A tier deck. We'll keep it there. Clarissa. Now, some would say Clarissa's like a B-ish tier deck. I actually think she's here. She might even be here. Honestly, like these two are kind of in the same kind of spot. I don't think this deck is that great against the meta right now. I think this deck's even worse. I don't know. I'm there. Eugene's kind of in a bad spot. I have, even though Eugene Chads out there are kind of aware that this deck is in a bad spot right now, but you really need your opponents to have rear guards to even do anything half the time, and some decks just don't really care, and the retire just isn't that insane in comparison to the value you get out of it. So sadly, I think this deck's in a bad spot. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. And also, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe. Felty Rosa. Felty Rosa is definitely in D tier right now. I think without the set 2 stuff, again, this deck just isn't performing. Maybe I'll put it in C tier. I do think the multi-attacking is just better. Next we have Flagberg. Now Flagberg is insanely underground. This is, I don't even know if I should be talking about this. This deck is so underground that I don't even know if people are gonna believe me when I say that Flagberg is low-key here, maybe even here. I don't think people are gonna believe me because this deck is just that low-key right now. Let me talk about it first before I officially put it anywhere. So Flagberg is the silent deck, the deck that nobody knows about, the deck that people think is like kind of bad, but in all actuality, it's actually one of the best Zorga decks right now, and people are just not aware of it. There are certain combos or certain ways you can build this deck to where you can actually make it perform at max max performance. It does really well, and the only downside to it is like missing maybe your pieces, but then again, you only need 2 pieces to make this deck skyrocket, and then you can play orders to make it push even further. I'm currently gonna put it in A tier. I honestly think this is an A tier deck. The way you pilot this deck will secure how well or bad you do with this deck. I've been piloting this deck like crazy the last week or so, and the deck is really good. As a Gravidia player, I can't beat this deck. I legitimately cannot beat this deck. Doesn't matter what I do, doesn't matter if I 5 meter, I just can't beat this deck because this deck draws a crap ton of cards early, doesn't commit at all. They need to commit 2 cards max, and then with the orders they don't have to commit anything from hand. It's just insane. It multi-attacks as a guard restrict, and you can keep it consistent every single turn. This deck also beats Bastion. Gravidia is easily S tier, definitely one of the strongest decks in the meta. These are kind of like this, honestly. Main reason because is these decks actually suck fighting against each other because they both do the same thing, except one has early game pressure, one has late game pressure. So it really just depends on triggers and kind of what the opponents have in their hand and PGs and stuff like that. So if you're a Gravidia player facing Bear Magnus, they don't have any PGs, they lose. And then if you're a Bear Magnus player facing Gravidia and they don't have any, and Gravidia doesn't have any PGs, they lose. So this is just a very this was a matchup. These decks beat all these decks below except this one. So they really just destroy all these decks down here. There really is, they're really like, at the end of the day, for the most part, like there are some wild situations and stuff like that, but for the most part, these decks just do really well, and that's why Gravidia is up here. Gravidia just can completely annihilate you on turn 3. They ride up, they can kill you on that same turn if you're not careful. I really have not tested Greed on. I'm here and here with it. I think it just decks out and just doesn't have enough pressure as far as I'm hearing about it. Like it's all Vanguard focused pressure, and as long as you just can take it or guard it, you're kind of like whatever. So I want to say it's a bad spot, but I haven't tested enough to know, so I'm gonna put it in D tier, and I'm gonna put it above Clarissa because I just think Clarissa isn't that good. Hexa Orb. Hexa Orb I'm gonna put actually up here. I think Hexa Orb has a chance to be successful. I just think it's just having a tough time right now. Kyrie's in a bad spot right now in my opinion, but she might be like here. She might even be like up here somewhere. This deck is very reliant on Persona Ride, and because of that, I just hate that concept of this deck. I just don't want to rely on Persona Ride all the time, so I'm just like, you know, because of that, I want to put it here, but it's really not like that terrible of a deck. The deck itself gets a ton of draw, you get a ton of power, and once you hit Persona, you're kind of just insane. And like, there's like these random people that just like win with it. Like it's crazy. People just like destroy with this deck out of nowhere, and it's just yeah, it just succeeds. It's just crazy how much this does. At the end of the day, the low row is like really low. Like when you miss everything, you kind of just auto lose, and there's nothing you can do to come back. Larone is low-key another sleeper deck into this specific meta. We all know people know about Larone prior to this, but Larone is actually like here, probably maybe even here right now. Larone is actually really strong still, even with the not having that much. It's actually still insanely good. Like the deck can still steamroll you. It's a little bit more luck related now, so I might even put it here. because you need a little bit more luck with it to kind of win. I do think it's more of a B tier deck. I think it's better than Buff Saga because it has a faster win con than Buff Saga does for pretty much the same situation. Larone says, hey, you have a guard restrict and I have 2 crit and I'm 60k. Whereas Buff Saga is kind of the same thing, except I retire 2 frontal rear guards, I get power and I get a crit, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So Buff Saga's win con isn't as solid as Larone's win con. So for that, I think Larone is better. Next we have Magnolia. A lot of people I think this deck's like obscenely strong and all this stuff. I actually will think Flagberg is better, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just on some kind of copium, but I would generally think Flagberg is better. So I actually think it's something like this right now. I do not think Magnolia is as strong as people say it is. I actually think it's like here. It's not bad. It's not bad by all means, but you have to like make it there for it to start really accelerating. Because of that, I think it's here. Flagberg commits a lot less and does more for the same numbers. By the way, the numbers that these 2 cards provide are pretty much the same. So that's my personal opinion. I do admit that late game this deck is like insane, where this deck just stays consistent. Nirvana, I think, is literally right next to Magnolia. I would say Magnolia is probably better than Nirvana. I would even say Bastion is better than Nirvana. I think Nirvana's up here. The reason being is that Nirvana is really strong at its peak, but it has to get there as well. It's also very reliant on hitting overdress units. And while yeah, you can get your big restand or whatever, the restand really isn't that scary. It's like you know, the first attack is like 23. The second attack will be high. You know, you guard the 23. You take the really high column and you're kind of whatever. I think the Nirvana player really needs to stack really hard to kind of like really succeed. Now, granted, if you can't board wipe at all, they just kind of lose. But guess what? These decks board wipe. This deck, by the way, retires. I forgot to mention that, but Flagberg retires, so they're just gonna retire this. And yeah, you can get it back, but you have to keep using your resources to kind of get everything back. And Orphist, probably here. He's like somewhere around here. Orphist hasn't changed at all. I don't think he's viable enough to bring to tournament, sadly. So he's probably gonna have to stay out here because this is still tournament viable here. These are decks that you can still bring and kind of see success here. Like the cutoff is here, right? So because of that, I think Orphist sadly falls into the C tier. I love Orphist. I really love Warfist. Like, gosh, it's such a cool deck. I don't know why. It's very simple, and I think I like the simplicity of it, which is weird because I usually don't like simple decks. But I just I can't take it to tournament. I know exactly where my fate is if I take it to tournament. If I don't see triggers, I pretty much lose the game, and it just sucks. Now, granted, Orphist does do a really, really good job if he sees triggers. If he sees triggers, he can actually win very quickly, but you have to see triggers, and if you don't, you just lose. So you're very dependent on your draw. Because of that, it just sucks. Also, you could potentially whiff your worlds, and if you whiff your worlds, you kind of just really have a tough time, so it's just not worth it. Next, we have Overlord. I think Overlord's like here. I think it's in a bad spot right now. The deck can randomly win some games. It's really weird, but I don't think it changes the fact that at the end of the day, it's just not that great. PBO is definitely here. There was that one random win in Japan. I really have no idea how they won. I took the exact same list. I tested it. Yeah, I don't see it. I just don't see it. I really don't. Like I said, maybe there's something I just don't know, but I really just don't see it. I think it just doesn't do enough. Prison. So Prison is probably here. Prison, I think it's kind of more like this even, I would say. Maybe even something like that, because okay, so Prison is matchup dependent as well. Prison defeats Nirvana, but Prison loses to Bastion, Magnolia, and pretty much all the rest of these. And you can't tell me otherwise. Like I just won't believe you. Prison isn't bad, and it does kill these decks. I would even say it could kill all these decks, but it doesn't kill anything up here. These 5 right here, it's not going to get through them. They just don't care. None of these decks care about the Prison mechanic. You can play around it. If you play around it carefully, they're never gonna see that super condition. It's really rare. They have to stack super hard, and if you keep poking their rears or retiring their rears, like something like this and something like this, or smacking into their rears, the deck falls apart really fast. I don't know if people are aware of that, but the deck does fall apart. You have a chance to like heal out of games and do all this stuff, because if you see Prison heal, that's really bad for you. You never want to see Prison here heal, because if they have another turn for a triple drive, that means that's another turn for you potentially to die, and you don't want to give them that. So I think because of that is there. But Prison does kill off, I think, these 2 decks, but this one's more of a wildfire deck. But Prison deals with these a lot better, because Larone is it doesn't deal with retire pretty well. So that being said, this deck kind of punishes Larone pretty well. Next we have Ballista. Definitely a bad spot. Probably the worst of all of these. Maybe sometimes it's here, maybe sometimes it's here, but for the most part it's just there. It's just bad. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, man. It's just not very good. It's unfortunate because I do think this deck had a chance, but then a lot of stuff changed and meta shifted, and this deck definitely had some of the worst support. And I think if you bash Skull like as early as possible, it could probably win some games, but it's just so hard. I think even with the new stuff, this deck's gonna struggle. So I think that this deck's gonna just stay in a bad spot for a while. And then we have Zorga. Zorga is one of those decks that people just had no idea how good or bad it is, and I think it's hilarious because people really are underestimating this deck. It's not like perfect. The deck is definitely not perfect, but the deck is way better than I think people think it is. We'll keep it here. It's the best of the B tier. It's literally, I think it's very viable. I think you could definitely take it and you'll see success, and then you'll see some games where you're struggling. Zorga does not do well against Barrow Magnus or Bastion, or in some cases even Magnolia, but everything else it kind of just doesn't care about. It just does its own thing, and it just kind of exists, and it survives forever, and it can also deck you out. So it has a lot of really cool stuff that it can do. I think it beats all of these decks easily. I don't think it's gonna have any issues. I do think the higher up decks it starts struggling with, mainly Barrow. Like I said, Barrow is probably a tough one. Prison can be a tough matchup, but actually if you play it out smart, you can actually outplay Prison. Bastion is definitely one of the hardest matchups. It's always has been, and it still is that way, mainly because if you're going second as a Zorga player, you kind of just have a really tough time. Going first, you're a little bit better, but still really sucks because Zorga is all about setup, and if you can't set up in time, Bastion just defeats you. Magnolia has a similar thing where it could just defeat you, but again, like it's not as terrible. Flagberg actually can board wipe pretty easily, but Flagberg is kind of a tough matchup for Zorga. But I do think Flagberg beats Zorga, but Zorga isn't too far behind. I just think Flagberg draws a lot faster, so it makes Zorga just less relevant when it starts swinging at you. So that's pretty much it. Let me look at this tier list. Wow, do I really only have 2 decks in S tier? I might. So Bastion's the one that I was thinking about moving up, and I think I'm still gonna stay to that. I think Bastion can stay up here. And yeah, I think this is pretty solid. I don't think any of these decks, except this one. I do think that this one has a chance. I gotta test this some more. This deck is the most, like, I guess, like, these two are really consistent. Like, they just do their thing every single turn. This one's the wild one out of the loop. And these are just consistent, just do their thing. So yeah, I do think that this is pretty accurate. I think a lot of people really misjudged Bastion and really thought that these two were like the better decks, but I do honestly think that Bastion is still like a really solid deck. Like I don't know, man. I don't know how else to exploit it. I think the deck's good, but like maybe it's just me. And like I said, these are my opinions, so like maybe I'm just wrong. I don't know, but that's why it's just how I feel. That's my tier list. I hope you guys liked it. I'm sorry if my opinions might be harsh or not harsh. I don't know. At the end of the day, I love all these decks for their own way. Like I love them. We're just talking from a competitive standpoint here. At the end of the day, I enjoy all these decks. I've played all these decks. I think they're all fun. They're all creative. They're all super fun and just fun to play and pilot. But you know, this is from a competitive standpoint, and competitively, this is just how I feel. And you know, it's just how it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it helps you be insightful. Tier list is made by Dean, by the way. There they are. This is made by Dean. This was not made by me. So if you want to hit up Dean, go for it. This is their tier list. So have at it. Enjoy all that fun stuff. If you want to create your own, feel free to create your own. You can drop it down in my Discord and tell me how you feel, or at me on Twitter. I'll have the link to this exact tier list below as well. So have at it. Other than that, guys, I gotta peace out now. Say my last vidania. I'll see you guys next time. Have fun. Get ready for Springfest. It's coming up soon. California is right around the corner. So let's get started. The competitive scene is getting there. The team leagues are starting. Let's have some fun. So peace out. Last vidania. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.